All right, guys, here we are with the number 3 draft analysis team with Matthew Heater's team for the NCPL Commander Draft. Here again, helping me is going to be Leo and Sean. I hope you guys enjoyed their insight last time. I think it was really good and gave us a little bit of more well-rounded insight. But yeah, go ahead.
We're doing these videos back to back, and now we're talking about Miltank again.
Yeah, here's Miltank again.
We're really milking it.
I think Miltank's gonna have less of a spotlight on this team. Matt's got a lot of really big threats on this team. So
Thank God, I was about to have a cow.
there we go. Finally, we got that in there. I rated Matt's offense a 9.5. A little bit of why I rated a 9.5. He has so much at his disposal. Not to mention his offensive speed tier is really good across the board. Nothing's extremely high besides Noivers, but everything is fast. Like
It's not blistering so, but it's at least like fast enough to outspeed a lot of potential threats.
Exactly, and I mean he's got setup on Houndoom, Torterra, Silvally, Toxicroak, Noivern, Noivern being Boomburst Throat Spray, and Primarina, Calm Mind or Throat Spray as well. That, or he can Spec, Scarf, Band, any of them. He's got Guts on Luxray. I just find his offense really hard to prepare.
Yeah, he's got a lot of potential wall breakers, and plus, as I found out recently in my game with him, Noivern as a utility mon can also provide tailwind, so a lot of the mons that aren't that fast, like say Primarina or things like Mesprit or even like that, they can outspeed you for a few turns, so that might be all they need.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's not like even without the tailwind support, he's slow, not by any stretch. Like he's got one of the more quick average speeds, I would say, of pretty much any team in this draft. He's got 1, 2, 4 Pokemon 90 or above base speed. Like that's got to be on the higher end of the spectrum for this draft, especially when we're dealing with lower tiers where stats tend to get a little bit lower, speed tends to get slower, or maybe at the very least mons tend to get a little bit more min-maxed perhaps, where they just have like one really good stat that's feeling them when you get to lower tiers.
Right.
I think having all of his speed tiers settled in the way that he has is going to make his offense one to be reckoned with for sure.
Yeah, I mean, even the speed tiers, he still has Sucker Punch on Toxicroak if something is going to be outspeeding those threats on his team. Just the sheer amount of power and setup, I find it so hard to prepare for. And then, coming from his captain as well, being bulky and able to set up with Fairy Water, there's not very many resistances, especially considering Primarina's move pool is pretty big as well.
Oh yeah, it's got quite a potential thing, and plus even its stabs don't really overlap. Water is good against fire, ground, stuff like that. Fairy's good against dragon, dark, stuff like that.
Yeah.
The resists don't really overlap, so if it can't hit you one, it can hit you for the other, guaranteed.
Yeah.
That's going to be a theme you're going to see across the board with this team. Matt did an absolutely phenomenal job spreading out his type coverages. He's got to jump the gun a little bit. I know we're mostly talking offense right now, but his typing is just very well conceived. He's got his Fire, Water, Grass as a defensive core, and then also in the same group of 10 Pokemon, he also has a Fairy, Steel, Dragon defensive core, like baked into the same group of Pokemon. It's actually kind of insane how much defensive coverage that he has.
Yeah, it's a pain to get through it.
Yeah. Granted, most of that is on mons that are a little bit more offensively oriented. Like you're not going to be swapping into your Primarina to take a lot of hits. It's got a lot of special bulk, so you can be smart about it, but it's not really something you want to be pivoting into at from Switch unless you have like slow pivots, which he doesn't have a ton of slow pivots as I look at it. But
no, I think getting in his Pokemon is not like an issue, but I do think that is one of the things that is going to require Matt to make some smart choices or predictions if he's not going to be using U-turn on Mesprit or Noivern or Silvally. But I think his team is going to do a lot of you hit me, I'm going to hit you harder type thing. Or vice versa. He's going to hit first, and then he's going to be able to tank the hit.
Absolutely, and Primarina is like the perfect starting point to really get that point across, because I don't want to completely overstate it, but I feel like for the most part on Primarina, the sets that tend to be the most impactful tends to be the ones where you're just going like, I'm just going to hit you harder. Here's a Choice Specs Moonblast or a Choice Specs like Hydra Pump.
Yeah.
Try tanking that.
You can absolutely try possibly making Primarina faster. You can give her a Scarf, you can give her
Totally
speed investments, but usually the more effective sets are high HP sets,
Mhm.
high ones with better defenses or special defenses.
Yeah.
And then just waiting, taking that hit, and then dishing it back tenfold.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that's going to be super annoying for people when they go in thinking that they're going to be able to take out things like Primarina or Luxray or Torterra, and these things live a hit, and then they hit you back 10 times harder. And I think that's going to be quite a surprise for people if they're not preparing properly.
Oh, definitely not.
Not to mention that some of his offensive threats, the physical threats, for example, they're also it also deters the opponent from wanting to wisp them, because he has a Guts user, a Flash Fire, and a Pokemon who doesn't really care about being burned, which is Primarina. I think that's going to be a really strong point to his offense as well. Is like, how can I break it down if I can't burn them, can't Toxic one of them? What are they going to do to slow it down?
In addition, even if you do use Stash one of them, you got Miltank over here with Heal Bell, who can easily just fix that. Mind you, Miltank has to switch in and get that Heal Bell off, but you can still fix it in a heartbeat.
Exactly, and I think that's going to be so frustrating to people that are going to trying to figure out how to shut down this offense, or be like, well, geez, I can't burn them, I can't Toxic them. Even if I Toxic and burn the ones that are able to, there's Miltank with Heal Bell.
And as a Hail Mary, you also have a Mesprit, which has Healing Wish, which can cure and restore full HP, which is not fun for anyone. Yeah,
let's abuse Guts Luxray for 3/4 of the match, and then when he's real low, we're just going to Healing Wish him back up. He's going to proc his Toxic Orb again, or his Flame Orb, and then he's going to go right back to doing what he was doing.
And a Pokemon like Luxray can really throw a wrench in your game plan so easily in that regard, because you can draft bring the Luxray with the intention of being something of like a status counter, and have people prepping for that and expecting the Guts to be something that is there to make sure that you can't get a Toxic or a burn on the Torterra, or get a burn on the Toxicroak. And then all of a sudden it comes out and you're getting intimidated instead on your big carries. Yeah. And it becomes a real problem that you didn't account for. And I think that that's actually going to be a real strength of his team across the board. We were talking earlier about the Miltank and talking earlier about the Mesprit as support options. But those Pokemon are not completely deprived of offensive capabilities. I think you're going to see a lot of potency out of this team when it comes to people that are expecting the Pokemon like Miltank and Mesprit to be support options, and instead he utilizes them as carries that come in and throw a wrench at the people that don't think that they're dealing with another offensive threat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Mesprit for sure. With the coverage that it has, the bulk, U-turn, it's going to be a really annoying chipping type Pokemon if he decides to bring it.
Totally. And even if you are bringing the Mesprit and trying to kind of front load it damage wise and make it more of an offensive threat, even if you are running like 3 attacking moves, or maybe like 1 setup move, 2 attacking moves, and you leave that 4th option for something like a Healing Wish, and then all of a sudden this Pokemon that you've been treating as an offensive threat all game at 1-2% HP, right at the very end of its life, because it will take hits, and it's tossing a Healing Wish that's slightly faster, it's the kind of thing that can really ruin your day.
Yeah, I mean, it could really change the pace really quickly when you think, like you're saying, you have it at 1% HP, and you've got, Matt's team down quite low. Well, it just passes off a Healing Wish, and it restarts the whole issue that you were trying to get rid of. I think you're right. That's going to be a really, really strong point.
They sacrifice a Mon to cripple, say, the Primarina or something like that, and it's down low. You don't have to worry about it anymore, and suddenly Mesprit comes in, and it's back to full HP, and you've got a serious problem, something you maybe spent or sacrificed statuses and mons for, and suddenly it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Primarina and Houndoom especially, I think you're going to find are going to be the premium wish, healing wish recipients, being able to come in, get a full health bar back, and tank the presumed dark or ghost moves that one was trying to use to take out the Mesprit.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you're just in for free.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Quick question about Healing Wish. Doesn't Healing Wish doesn't activate and then whatever mon comes in afterwards just misses any move, or is it kind of like a U-turn where it's just like it comes in and takes a hit?
I think you're right about that, actually. I think the user dies, the move for the opponent is used against no target, and then the next mon comes in.
Yes.
So I guess I'm giving bad information right now.
No, but it's still, I mean, the point of it is it's still the mon that's going to be coming in generally will be coming in free.
Yeah.
Like Sean was saying.
But
Even if you're not strictly coming in to tank and attack, you're still coming in. Like Primarina and Houndoom are going to find themselves as like the favorable matchups against your hypothetical Mesprit counters. So even if they're not taking a hit, odds are pretty good. I shouldn't even say odds are pretty good. It's a free pivot with a Healing Wish.
Yeah.
Free.
Yeah,
One
exactly.
Pokemon, but free. So you're going to get your favorable matchup regardless.
Yeah, just when you think its uses are at its end, Healing Wish. It's one last use, just revamped Matt's whole team. A point that I wanted to point out with Luxray before we move on to defense was with the Intimidate set. One of my friends in another group, he pointed out a really annoying Luxray set. It's Intimidate and Charm, and since Charm has a priority of 2, it's like a double Intimidate, and would be really, really annoying to deal with for physical attackers that don't. Yeah. Or it's Baby Doll Eyes. It's Baby Doll Eyes. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm like, why is sorry. That makes sense.
Baby Doll Eyes.
No, it's all good.
If that opponent's not carrying Earthquake, it's gonna be pretty annoying.
Yeah, absolutely.
But his defense. So I rated it a 7. Now I know his defense. A lot of mons cover each other, but the thing that I'm finding is a lot of the mons share weaknesses. Usually in 2s, what I was finding.
Okay.
Some more than 2. Earthquake being the biggest one there.
Oh yeah.
It's a pretty big weakness. But like things like ice and stuff like that, and fire are going to be covered by Miltank. But the thing with that is like Forterra and Noivern both share ice weaknesses times 4.
Quad ice weaknesses.
Yeah, quad ice weaknesses. And then you got the fighting weakness shared between Miltank and Silvally and Houndoom as well. So
a lot of people are going to take for granted if they have ice weaknesses because bulky waters are so prevalent and so all over the place that you can just be like, it's so easy to draft a bulky water. I don't need to worry about shoring up an ice weakness.
Yeah.
Do not underestimate the potential threat of an actual ice type as opposed to somebody using ice coverage.
Yeah. Because
freeze dry has made many of people very sad, especially those users of Pokemon like Quagsire, Gastrodon, and Whiscash, who are expecting like this ultimate defensive core and then are eating a 4 times weak ice move in the form of a freeze dry.
Perfect.
I feel a little called out here, dang.
But that is a perfect example. And so that's kind of why I've scored his defense a 7. While I don't think it's bad by any means, I do think it's good. I really do think that the shared weaknesses might bite him in the butt later when people are starting to realize this. They're prepping.
The good news is some of the shared weaknesses are countered by other mons. Like, for example, you mentioned 4 Pokemon weak to ground type moves for Steel, for Silvally Steel, Houndoom, etc. But we have Mesprit and Noivern.
Correct.
Mesprit is designed to kind of take a hit, like its use as a pivot are helpful, so it can eat that Earthquake with Levitate and then take whatever hit it needs to.
Correct.
And it's the same thing down the road, like fighting types, we have a triple weakness shared there, but that's also resisted by Mesprit again, Primarina, Toxicroak kind of, etc.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So he does have those shared weaknesses, which are good to bring, but they are also resisted by other mods that he can easily switch into.
Absolutely. And it's like, how much is he going to let it happen before he gets impatient? or the opponent starts to.
Exactly.
I will say, I know earlier in this discussion I mentioned his defensive cores, which I still think are very well designed.
Mm-hmm.
There is a certain degree to which you can tell that this is a low tier drafted defensive core, because you have the typings on your side, but on the whole, he doesn't have that much stat bulk.
No,
he's got typing bulk and well-rounded resistances, but you're not necessarily going to want something like a Houndoom coming in to serve as a resistance in a Firewater Grass core.
Yeah, 100%.
It happens to have the fire type to give it a hand, but it's not necessarily the kind of thing you're going to want to rely on as a resistance to cover things like your Torterra's weaknesses.
Yeah, it's not going to. Those things aren't going to want to come in and continuously take chip.
For sure.
Another point is that Primarina is the shared point in both those triangles. It's both Fairy type and the Dragonsteel Fairy.
That's true.
And it's the water in the Watergrass Fire.
Yeah.
It pulls a lot of weight in this comp, which is the captain. It's supposed to pull weight.
Yeah, but also it means it's going to be targeted and it's going to be whittled down a lot if he uses it like that.
Yeah.
So he either can't use it like that, or he's got to use it for one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely true.
Yeah, I think that it'll similar to Chris, it'll come down how he's planning to use it and if he utilizes it that way effectively.
I think he does have actually quite good tools to counteract the Primarina's resistances. I know that we were talking earlier about a couple of shared weaknesses, the ground one most notably, but it is, I think, very good that he's drafted well in this captain format, in the sense that the most glaring weaknesses in a captain's team are going to be on your captain. It's in there every game. People are going to be running poison types to counter the Primarina. They're going to be running electric types to counter the Primarina. Mm-hmm. And so that's where your Pokemon like your Luxray and your Torterra come in to eat those free electric hits, or your Toxicroak or your Savali Steel to come in and eat those free poison hits. I think that the Primarina does pull a lot of weight from a defensive standpoint, but I think he's done a really, really good job drafting tools that especially shore up the Primarina's weaknesses, even if the draft hasn't shorn up its weaknesses on the whole. Mm-hmm. I think that you can get around with that if you play around your captain well enough, and he is, I think, positioned well to do that.
Yeah, I think he can totally take advantage of people thinking really Earthquake or Poison Gunk Shot him, something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But so now moving to the speed, I gotta look at my notes here. I'm kind of confused why I put it at 7.5.
You think it should be higher?
Yeah, I think it should be a little bit higher. Like I said, he doesn't have anything that's like way over the top besides Noivern, but all across the board, his team is fast, and I think that might be hard to deal with if he chooses to be a pivoting team. For example, if they don't have a ground type, it's going to be really frustrating with Luxray, Savali, and Mesprit switching between each other. Luxray Volt switching into Mesprit to take away the ground, or Savali doing the same thing, parting shot into something else. If they don't have the speed or the prediction to figure that out or slow it down, I think it's going to be.
What I think is actually really impressive about the speed tiers for this team is he's done a good job, I think, in recognizing that in lower tiers you are better off drafting for above average speed as opposed to like blow you out of the water speed. Yeah. And I think that comes back to what I was mentioning before about how there's a lot of min-maxed Pokemon in the lower tiers. A lot of Pokemon that have one stat that is like far above and beyond any other stat that they have. Yeah. And that kind of leaves them out just because they are so predictable. And you look at a Pokemon like Noivern, like, yeah, it has very high base speed, but it's almost kind of fast for nothing just because it doesn't really have the best offenses to make advantage of that high speed.
Yeah.
And I think that Noivern sticks out in that regard when you compare it to some of the other Pokemon on his team that are at like the base 95, base 100, but have the kind of offensive power to really take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. Like your base 106 attack on Toxicroak on top of an 85 speed. Mm-hmm. Or the Houndoom with 13 more points of special attack in base than the Noivern at the cost of about 25 speed. But I think on the whole, you're probably going to take that in the lower tiers because there's not many Pokemon that are really competing that highly above the base 95, base 100.
That's right. I also think that the Tailwind was a big thing. I wrote it down, but I don't know. I guess I did not account for that in the score that I gave for his speed because I think that's going to be something that's brought often. Maybe not to every single game, but I think it will be often for Houndoom and Luxray to get a double speed and be able to run specs or nasty plot and not have to worry about that speed difference is going to be really devastating.
It only lasts for 4 turns, but speaking from experience, if he gets it up and then he transitions or pivots into another mon, it can be used very well.
Yeah.
Like if you get Houndoom, it's suddenly outspeeding your one Pokemon that was really fast that was going to be used to counter Houndoom.
Yeah.
Or it will, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And if they get that move off, then you're probably, that mon's not getting back up again.
Yeah.
The Tailwind is like a 4-turn support move, but I think in this comp, just because of the Pokemon that's delivering the Tailwind, you almost have to kind of disregard a turn into that, because Noivern's outspeeding 90% of the Pokemon that are in this tier anyway.
Yeah.
So it's not like Tailwind is actually having an impact. So realistically speaking, you're Tailwinding, and then you're probably U-turning into something that wants the Tailwind, because Noivern is going to be outspeeding anyway.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of makes it less potent, personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's only 3 turns.
It's kind of similar to what I was saying, and I know these are independent videos, but when we were talking about Chris's Runerigus and how it can be kind of awkward to have your Trick Room Pokemon also be the Pokemon that most takes advantage of Trick Room. Yeah. This is kind of the opposite, where Noivern is your Tailwind Pokemon, but takes absolutely zero advantage of the Tailwind, to the point where it's almost like you're wasting a turn getting a pivot off there to get to something that actually cares about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah, the 3 turns, I mean, like Sean was saying, from experience, even though it's 3 turns, I do think that it is pretty deadly still.
Totally. I'm not trying to discount it.
Oh yeah, no.
Simply, just like you got to kind of squint and realize what's going on here to a certain degree. But
yeah, exactly. If those people can, wane that out a little bit and use protects or
immunities.
Yeah, things like that. It's going to be pretty annoying for Matt, who brought a team that's going to rely on Tailwind, which I don't think he will do. But if he does do that, it'll be pretty annoying if the opponent preps to be able to wait out that Tailwind.
Well, he also doesn't really have to bring the Tailwind either, because like I said before, his team is pretty dang fast. It's only for a team that's got like a really decently fast and strong Pokemon, like maybe my Venusaur and Sun, for example. Yeah,
exactly. That's a good example. Yeah. But with his hazards, I scored this an 8. He has 2 insanely reliable hazard setters. Mesprit and Miltank both are almost 100% always going to get rocks up if they have rocks in their arsenal. He also has Torterra to set up rocks, and he has Defog in Noivern and Defog in Silvally Steel.
I think this is going to kind of double back into my point earlier about Mesprit and Miltank potentially being very good sort of like surprise offensive threats. A Pokemon like Torterra is really what facilitates that, because you look at this team and you think that the Miltank does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to like your support and your bulk and maybe a little bit of hazard and support setting as well. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you're taking hits from it from a couple of different types, because it is a normal type, so it's got coverage out the wazoo. They all do.
Yeah.
And then the Torterra is switching out later and you're getting stealth racked on by the Torterra, and you're like, oh, okay. I didn't really expect that to happen. And because I didn't expect that, all of a sudden the Miltank has a bigger and more impactful job than I ever really prepped for. And I think that's going to be a huge threat.
Yeah. The only problem is with hazards is the fact that he only has Defog on there. And like I said, it's Noivern and Silvally. Now, Noivern, unfortunately, is flying type, which means that rocks are going to be quite the problem for it. So he's going to have to run heavy-duty boots on it.
Yeah.
Maybe boots on Silvally, depending on his mood.
Yeah.
But also, he only has Defog. He's always going to be wiping away that rock. So whatever mon he brings rocks on, as soon as you find out, you have to be on that fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Noivern is... Sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. You go ahead.
Noivern is kind of an unfortunate Pokemon to be relying on when it comes to that too, because I don't think it's a Pokemon that you can so casually just slap a heavy-duty boots on and still think that it does its job.
Oh no, it's very frail.
Yeah, it's very frail, and I think for the most part you want to give it items that are going to augment its offenses and augment its speed more than anything else, and heavy-duty boots doesn't necessarily coincide with that, which is why I think it becomes a little bit more awkward when it comes to a defog threat.
Yeah, I think Silvally is definitely going to be the primary defogger. I'd be pretty surprised if Noivern comes out as the defogger more often than Silvally, just because, like you said, having heavy duty boots on Noivern kind of belittles what it wants to do, and that's be annoying because it's fast, chip you down, boom burst or throat spray, fire off Draco meteors, and then out.
Yes,
I do think that I've been talking a lot, John. Please go ahead.
Oh, no, I was saying we just throw specs on instead, and that's suddenly a lot more friendly, especially with speed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I definitely do agree with that, and I think even though this is kind of counteracting the point that I just mentioned, there is a lot of potency, I think, in having your two major defoggers be either a ground weakness or a ground immunity. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a lot of room to play some mind games with that, just because you're like, oh, like one of them could have defog, neither of them could have defog, maybe just one, maybe both of them even, and it really brings into question if you're in a position where it's like obvious that your opponent being Matt in this scenario wants to get rid of hazards. Now you really have to play a game. Do I think that the Noivern is going to come out to deal with this and I hit Ice Beam and potentially get a one-shot kill? But if the Silvally comes out, it's not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. Or vice versa. Oh, I think the Silvally is going to come out, I'm going to Earthquake, and then Noivern comes out to with heavy-duty boots in the scenario, because why not? And then defogs, and all of a sudden, Matt's really mind-gamed you and gotten himself in a really good position.
Yeah, I think Matt has a lot of potential to play the mind games here, especially with, not just in the sense of how can I get these rocks off the field between Noivern and Silvally, but if they're also thinking about Ice Beam for the Noivern, like you said, I mean, what's to say he just doesn't switch into, Houndoom or Primarina and offensively take advantage, and then it puts the opponent in a position to either take some massive chip damage or lose a Pokemon.
That's a very good point, because you could easily just, you take the Stealth Rocks damage or whatever hazards you have set up, but even if you just take that and you take the Ice Beam, or you take, I don't know, for Silvally, the Fire type or the Ground type move, then suddenly it's a big problem to take another hit from the mod that just switched in. It's looming there.
Yeah.
And it can easily just, even if it doesn't kill the mon right out, it's going to at least bring it down to a reasonable health.
Yeah, it's going to punch a big hole, and I think that's going to be important to Matt's mind games if he's going to be playing them, to not get stuck in the mind game of between two Pokemon, because like we were saying, Matt has a lot of resistances that he can play around.
Not even just resistances, he has 6 Pokemon that have an immunity.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Between
so many pivoting options.
Yeah, like the Flash Fire, the Steel,
it's got double immunity. It's got Flash Fire and Dark type for
Psychic. I honestly wasn't even thinking of the fact that he has Flash Fire. I was strictly looking at the Dark type, so that's even more points.
I didn't think about the Psychic, but that's going to be really good for Toxicroak.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got that kind of coverage for like most of his Pokemon too, like Noivern's Dragon weakness, swap it into Primarina. Primarina's Electric weakness, go into the Torterra. You have options for immunities on just about every major weakness that your offensive threats have.
Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Like we said earlier, he's got a lot of the weaknesses covered. Like, he has a few Pokemon weak to ground types, but he also has 2 Pokemon immune to it, and 1 Pokemon that just doesn't really care about it, being Torterra.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is a lot of those immunities are, again, on weaker Mons. We don't want to switch Noivern into something and then mispredict an Earthquake and get, I don't know, maybe not Ice Beam, but like a normal move to the face.
Yeah.
We don't want to switch Houndoom into a Psychic, and surprise, not Psychic, it's actually any other move, period.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like we were saying, he's not going to want to take that chip too often. If that's if he doesn't bring Mesprit with Healing Wish, right?
Yeah. Like you said, it is a good mind game, but the problem is once the opponent gets fooled once, it's not. They'll be watching out for that, and it's easy to watch out for and just easily overpredict or
100%.
Watch out for it.
I think that's a perfect example of kind of how Hayden plays. Hayden's always trying to do those mind games, and sometimes he pays for it dearly. I think if Matt doesn't do that, it's gonna be really frustrating and really stressful for the opponent. But if he does decide to do that, I think it's going to be vice versa. It's going to be stressful for Matt if the opponent starts to figure out his mind.
I can definitely agree with that. I think that the immunity thing that I pointed out earlier, like obviously that's a huge ball in your court when it comes to defensive capabilities, but can also be kind of a double-edged sword because while having 6 immunities pretty much always gives you an option when it comes to like pivoting in and getting a no damage, like net neutral turn, it also makes it quite obvious potentially what you're going to be swapping into as a defensive counter. Like if you have your Noivern out there against maybe a Scarfed Dragon type or like a Scarfed Ice type that you think has the potential to outspeed and one-shot it, well, it's pretty obvious at that point that the Primarina is probably going to be your switch in for that. And and that's the kind of thing that can come back to bite you if it's too obvious what you're going to pivot into because your answers are too good. Yeah. Which sounds kind of paradoxical, but it really can be a thing that comes back to bite you.
It really does. It's a really weird concept to think about when you have such a good resisting team like does it actually work in his favor or is it too much?
I think there's not really many ways that it can't work in his favor. I just think that like the way that Pokemon is balanced, there's always going to be a way to get around it, even when you have something like a fairy type that people are generally like, yeah, fairy type is probably a little bit too powerful. Having those like obvious weaknesses does make it pretty apparent exactly how you should be responding to it. And I think that is kind of a thing about Matt's team where
it's very obvious.
It's pretty, I don't want to say scripted, but like the flow of the match, I think, is probably going to be a little bit more predictable than what you're going to get out of a lot of your other matches. Like Matt's answers are pretty obvious, and I think the answers to Matt are pretty obvious.
Yeah, I agree. Last we have his momentum. I rated 7.5. This is something that I'd really like to see from his team. Is since his team has such a high base speed all around the board, I'd really like to see him do a lot of volt turning and parting shot and getting Primarina in to fire off those Moonblasts or Surfs or Hydro Pumps.
Well, he's got 4 pivots on here, right? He's got Mesprit, he's got Noivern, he's got Silvally, and he's got
Luxray.
Primarina.
Primarina.
Oh,
Primarina has flip turn. He has 5 pivots.
Right,
yeah, I totally forgot about the flip turn.
Yeah, so 5 pivots, that's even better.
Yeah, so that is one thing that I'd really like to see from his team. I rated it a 7.5 because while he has a lot of pivots, Luxray and Silvally share a weakness between the pivots. The pivoting from those mons is going to be limited, and then it could become predictable, especially if he's going to be pivoting Silvally out into Primarina often. I think he's really got to switch that up if he's planning to do.
I think for the momentum question of Matt's team, the potentially awkward point that he runs into is he has really well-defined speed tiers and really well-defined offense, but I don't necessarily think there's a lot of overlap between the two. You're either going to get hit hard or you're going to get hit fast, and I think that's the kind of thing that can really hurt momentum to a certain degree. Like, yeah, Noivern will pretty much always get a shot out first, but he's not going to one-shot anything.
Yeah.
Primarina, on the other hand, is going to get outsped by most things in this tournament, but if you're taking a Moon Blast or you're taking a Hydro Pump, you better be ready for it.
Yeah, like he doesn't really have anything to clean up after the momentum, I think is kind of what we're looking at here.
Toxicroak with Sucker Punch or Bullet Punch can usually clean up after a few things.
That's true. I think Toxicroak is a little bit underrated in that regard. I do think you're right on that. And definitely.
I think if there's one Pokemon on Matt's team that people are going to sleep on and underestimate it in terms of a threat is going to be the Toxicroak. Yeah, I think that is going to be the Pokemon that you're going to see most take advantage of lack of prep because people are too busy worrying about things like the Primarina.
Totally agree with that. I myself always overlook Pokemon, and it's super annoying when you get into the match and you realize, wow, this thing's actually got decent coverage. Yeah. Poison fighting. This is pretty annoying, and it has priority. I don't really know what to do about this. And then you go for a switch because you need something to deal with it, and it sets up Swords Dance. Now you're really stuck.
Exactly. It's so much of a worse threat now.
Yeah. But overall, I think 39.5 for Matt's team. is really good. It could be a little higher, I think. They did think that I made a mistake on the speed tier. Sorry, Matt. I think Matt's team is a very strong team in the.
And I think something to probably keep in mind as we're dealing with a lower tier tournament is that we're thinking about team strength in a scale of what we're usually dealing with, which is a lot of like OU,
That's right.
It's a lot of UU. I think people are going to maybe scoff a little bit at some of these lower ratings, but you have to keep in mind that we're just dealing with an overall lower power level.
Yeah.
The way to get to a 50 is so much more difficult when you can only draft out of tiers 5 and 4 than if you have the option to really shore things up with a strong OU or UU pick.
Absolutely, and that's the thing. People gotta remember, 50 is like that's freaking perfect. I mean,
you're not going to see a 50. There are probably I don't think there's not going to be a 50.
For example, Jonas's team last draft. I mean, Jonas went undefeated almost the entire draft, but his team was not a 50. He played it like a 50, and I think that's what people. I hope people realize that just because there's a score of 35 or 39, it doesn't mean that your team is bad, because a lot of the things that go with teams is how you play that team. How do you utilize it? Chris's team is a perfect example of that. It's rated 36, but the thing is, if Chris uses it in a way that we're not thinking about and makes it a 50, then it works, right?
Yeah, and we're not discounting the possibility that a team is so good in one aspect that it can make up for lack of strength in other aspects. Like if you had like a 30 or a 31 overall score that happened to have like the best, say, defensive core drafted here, that is a team that is probably set to overperform. Probably set to make a pretty good impact just because it does what it does so well, even if it lets other stuff fall to the wayside.
The key of these analyses are really to identify what the teams are strong with, what they're weak against, what can we do to improve them. But ultimately, despite us analyzing and saying what they're good at and bad at, it comes down to the player to use them correctly or well at the very least.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the end of the day, the barometer that you should be comparing these overall scores to isn't how well they compare to 50. It's how well they compare to the other people in your division.
Absolutely. Exactly. And I think that's the biggest thing to take note of here. While all teams are going to be probably far from 50, all teams are going to be relatively close in score. I mean, for example, it's just because we just did it, but Chris's team is 36, Matt's team is 39. That's only 3 points from each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and they have dramatically different ways that they're. Overall, though, I think these. Well, I hope these are going to be really insightful for both the people versing these teams, but also the people that have these teams, pointing out some things that they may not have seen themselves, or some ways that they could use the team differently.
Or maybe they're laughing at us going, ha ha ha, I forgot about this.
yeah, more than likely. Yeah.
Somebody's going to go undefeated in a Pokemon that we like had little good things to say about is going to be like the MVP of the tournament or something.
Yeah, and then we're going to get the I told you so.
Right? Exactly.
All right, Leo and Sean, I really appreciate you guys coming out for these. I really liked doing these with you guys and Calvin as well. I think these bring a really different type of light to the. I hope everybody enjoys them.
My pleasure.
Anytime.
All right, guys. Hopefully see you on one soon.